Hi everyone, I'm Lou, the co-founder and CTO of Zip, and I'm here today to talk about why stakeholder adoption is more important than ever before, and how every single person here should be thinking about improving your intake process. Before I jump in, I wanted to share a little bit more about myself and why my co-founder, Rajul, and I started Zip. Before Zip, I led the search platform team at Airbnb and also was the head of engineering for Airbnb Experiences, one of Airbnb's 4 business units, and had the opportunity to see the company grow from a few hundred people all the way up to almost 10,000. How many people here, just show of hands, have used Airbnb before? Great, plenty of people, a lot of people. And Airbnb is actually so successful today because it took the complicated, risky process of booking someone else's home into a seamless and trustworthy user experience. In fact, there are over 1,000 people today building the Airbnb search page and listing page, optimizing every little detail on listing card, doing things like leveraging AI to find the most appealing photos to show on the search page, making sure that it's fast, performant, and really optimizing, running hundreds of tests to optimize every little detail. And user experience really is at the heart of what made Airbnb successful and what drove adoption of Airbnb. There's such a stark contrast between booking a listing on Airbnb, which is really seamless, easy, intuitive, and actually going through our own procurement process. Every time Rajul and I, we needed to work through a new vendor, work through and onboard a new vendor, or manage a large software renewal, it was always really a forked process. As a requester in the business, it was really hard to figure out, where do I go to start? What are the steps in the process? Do I actually kick off a sourcing event, or do I just create a PO? Wait a minute, which CLM system do I actually use? IT and security had their own risk process that went through Jira, and there's a P2P responsible for obviously the finance and budgetary approval. And as a requester in the business, I was always really confused on where to go. There wasn't a single front door, and the process was just so forked. And what we noticed and what we found during this process is that there was a lot of coordinating struggles between procurement, legal, IT, security, compliance, and all sorts of different systems. And it usually fell down to the procurement team to actually manually track and shepherd people through the process. It was a black box, it was low visibility for both the requester and different stakeholders. As we kind of dug into this problem more and more, we spoke with about 100 different CFOs, CPOs, heads of procurement when we started the company, and we found this was a universal challenge across companies. The more tools and systems, there are more tools and systems involved than ever before, and there was black box and very little visibility. That visibility is actually required to be more strategic around controlling and managing spend. And finally, because requesters really had low visibility into existing contracts, existing vendors, there were so many duplicate vendors, and even duplicate contracts from the same vendor, and there was a need to consolidate. We talked a lot about having analytics and data to kind of understand and assess the problem, and the problem was well understood, but it was actually very difficult to actually fix this problem because of a low adoption. And so what we've kind of seen is really B2B spend has fundamentally changed in the last 10 years. And just to highlight some of the change, wanted to share a quick customer quote. So Chris Key is one of our customers, and he's the VP of sourcing and procurement at Northwestern Mutual. They're a Fortune 500 company, one of the largest financial services in the United States. They manage almost $500 billion in assets. And what he says is, the procurement playbook really needed a reset. Today, because of decentralization of spend, every department's voice actually influences spend, and these supplier partnerships are so critical, and much more critical than ever before. And to really adapt, process visibility, transparency was so key to unlocking strategic influence with stakeholders. What Chris describes is actually what we've heard thousands and thousands of times now. Today, what we found, is that there's actually been 2 fundamental large changes in the world. The first, last 10 years, and the first is that spend has decentralized. Spend decisions have been pushed further and further down into the organization, and there are actually more department-level requests than ever before. Every department relies on more critical vendors to power their function. The second thing that we've seen is that there's been an explosion of vendors. Companies are focusing more and more today on their comparative advantage in the world and outsourcing more of their work to vendors. In fact, many of our customers today actually have more vendors than they have employees. And this certainly was not the case 20 years ago. And on top of that, more vendors, more critical vendors, what's been challenging is the process has actually become much more difficult. It's become hopelessly complex. This is actually, on the left, is actually, or I guess you're right, is actually a process chart describing one of that our customers shared with us around what their procurement process actually looks like. It spanned 20 to 50 different emails, lots of different steps, and it was impossible for them to consistently adopt their process. This leads to low employee adoption, low spend visibility, a lot of wasted time during this process, and increased risk because it was impossible to follow the compliant process. And this is a massive employee experience problem for an employee to actually follow this process. And it's also a massive workflow problem for procurement as well. And because of these two really large changes in the world, the stakes for procurement have actually been higher than ever before. Wanted to share another quote, but Ryan is the head of sourcing and procurement at Databricks. They're one of the most valuable private startups in the world today, and they're also another one of our early customers. And for Ryan, the last 5 years have really illuminated procurement's pivotal role. When put in the spotlight, procurement played a really strategic role in navigating unforeseen economic pressures, and due to the criticality of core vendors to every business in the world, played also a really critical role to increase supplier due diligence. And what we've seen, is that every enterprise today relies on a wider vendor base. If you look at engineering and IT, there may be a few tools 10 years ago, like GitHub, Jira, maybe ServiceNow, that were core. But today, to run a world-class engineering and IT organization, you need to have the best vendors to help automate your processes. It's affected every function. Marketing, if you look at marketing, 10 years ago, there was a lot of emphasis on print and TV. But today, there's much more focus on social, online marketing, SEO, SEM, and there have been tens of thousands of marketing software, services, consulting agencies really required to build a world-class marketing function. And finally, it's affected every function. It's also it's affected every vertical as well. If you look at banking, banking has had to undergo a large transformation, going from on-prem software, a lot of manual paper processes, into the cloud, delivering a digital experience for their customers. And vendors were really at the heart of this transformation. But given how critical vendors are, low adoption is actually fatal to a business. Low adoption means increased cost and risk. If you can't get visibility into the spend early enough, there's a lack of spend control and more rogue spend, and procurement ends up becoming a lot more tactical, managing the tail end of the process rather than strategic, helping stakeholders find the right vendor, source the right vendor, negotiate contracts early on. Low adoption also means increased risk to the company, leaves the company open to risk. If you look at vendors today, the majority of breaches today, data breaches today, actually happen from third-party vendors. And if you don't have a singular auditable record for vendors across all of these cross-functional teams, data security, compliance, IT, it really leaves the company open to risk. And finally, low adoption means a lot of wasted time across the organization as well. And if you look at the tools that we actually use for procurement, the tools we actually use to manage purchase requests really actually expose the root of adoption challenges. The tools that we use are highly manual. This was actually a chart from our recent B2B purchasing trends survey. But the primary tool today that we still use to manage purchase requests are phone call, email, Excel, Slack, Teams. There's no central point of collaboration for purchase requests, and it's certainly the central collaboration is not the traditional ERP and P2P system. Cool. So what's the solution? The solution starts upstream with intake. As a company here at Zip, we created the intake management category almost 3 years ago now, and we spent the first 2 years really trying to talk and share about this new category, intake. It's been actually really energizing in this conference today because we've actually had people actually come up to us directly and start asking about what intake is, and so wanted to share a little bit more about intake. Intake, if you really look at the core of it, this is another one of our customers, but Joe Frederick is the head of procurement and sourcing at Snowflake. They're a global 2,000 company managing cloud data warehouses. And Snowflake really had an explosion of growth after their IPO. They had one of the largest IPOs in the last few years, and procurement played a really strategic role in driving this growth. And for Joe, embracing technology really isn't enough. It's focusing on adoption and user experience is actually really the bedrock on which a strategic procurement future is built. And it really starts at the front end, upstream with intake. So the question, I guess, that a lot of people are asking is really what is intake? And I think Gartner actually had a report earlier this year describing intake, and what Gartner says is intake management solutions actually allow procurement to provide end users with a single point of engagement for tracking all procurement-related activities. Really a single front door to engage with the rest of the business, which helps simplify how they work with the rest of the business. Getting intake management, intake right, helps drive key business results like driving savings, having early visibility early on, and actually ensuring and enforcing compliance. So to fix adoption, there are really two parts of the solution. The first part is intake. And the second part is orchestration. So the first is intake. Really taking the complicated process that I showed earlier, and I'm sure everyone has some version of this, or maybe 30 to 40 pages of spend policies that you share with your team. But it's really hard for end users, employees, to actually follow the process. So the first is intake, taking this really complicated process and providing a single intuitive front door for all procurement activity in a way that's really easy for your end user to engage and kick off a request. The second really is orchestration. After the business submits the request, intake procurement has some of the most complex processes across the business. These processes depend on the policies for the type of spend, the category of spend, location, project, spend threshold, and really without orchestrating the downstream process, intake management really falls short. And this graph kind of shows this is what the orchestration actually looks like. But if you really think about a single request, it spans from the time you kick off intake, it actually spans quite a few other systems. Like if you're trying to purchase software, IT has their own sets of reviews that it needs to do. In some cases, many different types of reviews. And security and compliance have their own GRC tools, where onboarding a new vendor, or in some cases purchasing a new request from a vendor, actually have to go to. Legal has a CLM tool, and there are all of these different sorts of tools and different sorts of steps. And orchestration really codifies these complicated policies, many systems and many processes that your company will go to into a single integrated work stream that loops in every stakeholder and integrates to your systems. So what intake does is in summary, what intake does is really helps you drive adoption, provides a single point of engagement for the business and the stakeholders, and orchestration helps take a really complicated process and translates it in a single integrated work stream. And the final question that's on everyone's mind today is really AI and how AI will impact the future of this. And what we're really excited about, we talked a lot about intake and orchestration today, but generative AI is something that will actually go one step further to automate the process. And I'm personally very, very excited about the capabilities it will unlock. If you look at these different parts of the process today, between security, IT, privacy review, today we can orchestrate the process, but there's actually a lot of opportunities to actually streamline and automate the downstream processes as well. So generative AI, will fundamentally transform how businesses buy. If you think about a lot of what the bottlenecks in the process today, there are thousands of hours, maybe tens of thousands of hours every single year on highly manual legal and security reviews. Businesses spend thousands of hours each year really translating manual and error-prone data entry and really translating contracts into purchase recs, POs, and invoices. And what generative AI does is it actually takes the unstructured data and translates it into structured data. We just had our first generative AI launch yesterday, actually, really focused on what Michelle talked about this earlier, around the opportunity around contracts. And what we did is we actually have unlocked the capability to take a contract, automatically take a 15, 20-page contract, automatically pull out all of the key terms around the contracts between start date, end date, really price, basic information, and contract details. But what's really exciting that we were also able to accomplish is automatically scan any MSA for over 100 different risks. And instead of doing it in 2 or 3 hours that it typically takes, we're able to do it in 10 seconds. And so we're really excited about the capabilities that will unlock and go from orchestrating the workflow to eventually automating more and more of the workflow. So thank you, everyone. This is a quick plug on Zip. We created the intake category when we started the company and have since helped everyone from startups to global 2,000 companies with enterprise-wide deployments. So if you're interested in improving your intake process, we'd love to talk. Come by our booth. If you're interested in learning more, feel free to come by. And we also just had a public launch of our new AI capabilities yesterday. It's mind-blowing. So if you're interested, you can scan the QR code and get a special demo. Thank you, everyone.